edition of the LFC Red Poets podcast. I'm your host, as normal, Les Lawson, and tonight we've got a special. Tonight we're joined by Charlotte Hennessy, whose dad sadly passed away at Hillsborough 34 years ago on Saturday, and I'm also joined as normal by Tommy Keegan and Pete Warburton. So first of all, welcome to the pod, Charles, and thanks for agreeing to come on tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I know we're leading up to the 34th anniversary, and it's not a nice week for any of us who are at Hillsborough, but especially for people like you and the rest of the family members who lost people. But I'd like to start and ask you, at the time on the 15th of April 1989, your dad goes off to watch the semi-final at Hillsborough. You're 6 years of age. How did you cope at such a young age with you losing your dad?
Well, my dad always went to the football, so that was nothing new for me. It was kind of like I shared my dad with Liverpool Football Club, so it was just the norm. And I don't really remember him going to the match that day. My mum tells me that I had a friend's birthday party, but honestly, I think I probably have a vague memory, but I can't be 100% sure that it was that birthday party that I was at. And it was mainly the days after the disaster that I remember that the phone was constantly ringing. There was people constantly coming to the house, and something didn't feel right. And I wasn't aware of what it was, but I knew that it was something bad. And now I know that was people coming to the house to see if there was any news about my dad yet, or if he'd come back. And from then on, really, it was all just, it's difficult because it is genuinely just all a bit of a blur. And it was only in 2011, after the birth of my third son, that I was then diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. So I never really understood why I could never remember those things. So I suppose I just kind of drifted through life, My mum tried to keep life as normal as possible for me. I was a typical teenager, but also quite a depressed, angry, troubled teenager as well. I never really wanted to discuss how my dad died or what had happened to him. But I do remember the year, it must have been in the 90s, late 90s, maybe 95, 96. And I remember my mum saying to me that the Jimmy McGovern drama was being shown on the TV, and she said, it might be a good way, for you to really understand what happened to your dad, because it's going to look at families and what they went through. And she said, would you like to watch with me and we'll watch it together? And I said, no, I'd rather go to youth club, and off I went. And I just, because I suppose then, thinking about it now, it's probably something that I didn't really want to face up to, and I didn't really want to know because I didn't really know a lot. So my childhood's quite it's quite a blurred, I honestly don't really remember a lot about being a child, to be honest.
Right, so how old were you then because you do so much for us supporters and the families who were at Hillsborough. Whenever anybody tries to sort of slur us or anything like that, you're always there defending us, and I can't thank you enough as somebody who was there. But how old were you when you started to sort of get really involved or come to realise what happened, and you've sort of the pennies dropped in the slot, if you like, if you want to put it that, and think, something really wrongdoings here. My dad was unlawfully killed, and I want to really fight to get the truth and get the best for him.
So during my teen years, I went to college to study health and social care because I always wanted to be a midwife. So it was at college for my IT project, we had to produce. Then it was do you remember those slideshows with the clip art and all the funky words? And then it was the in thing and everybody loved it. So we had to produce one of them on a topic. So I chose Hillsborough to be my topic. And it was when I was researching that really that I really came to realise. The first thing I came across was the Lord Justice Taylor's report, and it was quite difficult to read it in full then, as you know, the internet was very different then to what it is now, but you could pick up the vibe. Do you know what I mean? And so I did this big PowerPoint, and I'll never forget it. And I was so proud of it, and I felt like I solely all by myself at the grand age of 17 had like disclosed this, you know, like the police have lied here. Something's and I'll never forget the IT lecturer. When I'd finished, she just looked at me and went, right, and then just carried on like talking to the class like I hadn't even just done this presentation on how awful it is that my dad had died at Hillsborough and what the police had done, and you know what I mean. And I felt dead frustrated. I thought, God, I was so proud of what I'd produced. And I think, you know, back then that was only would have been like 98, 99 maybe. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't even 10 years after the disaster. So people's mindsets were still as they always had been. And then in 2002, I had my first son, Liam. And in all honesty, having him and the love that I felt for Liam, I knew that was how my dad had felt about me. And that sort of got the fire in my belly, if you like. And I thought there was a lot going on as well at the time, with regards to Hillsborough, and you know, I think it had been not long been the private prosecutions with David Duckenfield, and all of that was coming back up in the air. And what are they going to do? Where family's going to go from here? So yeah, it was from then really that I really started to ask my mum questions, and you know, and that was probably when I was around about 20 was the first time that we'd had any meaningful discussion. And then in 2009, when I gave birth to my second son, I was already, at that point, already friends with Anne Williams. And she was, I don't want to badmouth anyone, but she was probably the only person, the only family member that welcomed me with open arms and was just, you know, willing to help in any way that she could. And so I had Joe on the 13th of April 2009, and 2 days later, on the little Hospicom TV, I watched Andy Burnham give his speech at Anfield. And I said to my mum, why is Margaret and Trevor let a politician go to Anfield, mum? Why would they do that? And my mum said, if they've agreed to him being there, there'll be a bloody good reason. And she was right, wasn't she? Because then we fast forward and we have the hip report and whatever. So it was around about then that I became actively involved, around about 2009, 2010.
Yeah, Phil Scraton is an absolute hero of mine for the done, you know, in bringing Hillsborough, you know, to the forefront, and with the books he's written and everything. And you know, when he was appointed onto the independent panel, you know, it gave me confidence for the first time really that we might get somewhere. And then obviously then that report was produced, and it was just like a weight being lifted off your shoulders as somebody who had been there. You know, you and I still do to this day, I'll be honest with you, from time to time you feel guilty because every one of us who went to Hillsborough on that particular day got up on that bright, warm, sunny Saturday to go and watch the team play in an FA Cup semi-final at Hillsborough with the same goal, you know, to team get to Wembley. And, you know, there's so many people being traumatized by that day. You know, there was 97 people, as we know, lost their lives, countless others seriously injured. People since then, you know, have took their own lives because of their experiences at Hillsborough. And then that sort of panel seemed to, when that report was produced, and we got, you know, the apology in the House of Commons from David Cameron, you actually thought, all right, at last, you know, we might actually be getting somewhere now. But even at the back of my I'm thinking to be, you know, at the end of the day, the establishments are going to stick together, and the whitewash brushes are going to come out again. You know, you must know more than sort of I do, and Tom does, and Pete does, about some of the obstacles that were put in the family's way that might not have been in the public eye. You know, can you share anything like that with us, or is there any experiences that you've got where they were sort of slamming the door in your face, etc.?
Yeah, so well, I was sued by David Crompton because of so David Crompton sent an email in the run-up to the HIP report being released. Just a couple of days before that, David Crompton sent an internal email around South Yorkshire Police Force that said, we know what their version's going to be, regardless of what the report says. We know the truth. We know what the Hillsborough Justice Campaign are going to try and push. And we all just need to stick together, kind of thing. So when the HIP report came out, I was just like really overwhelmed. I went there with complete open eyes. This was, you know, I was fresh eyes. I was coming into it, you know, with a mutual respect for everybody involved. And I remember saying to my mum, look, if they find that the police didn't do as much as we thought, and they're not solely to blame, then we'll deal with it. And if we find that, you know, my dad died in the pen or died in the gym, we'll deal with it. Like whatever will be, will be. But for me that day, it just got worse and worse, because they announced that 41 of the people could have survived. So that was just, it was, I don't even know how to describe what it was like being in that Anglican cathedral when they announced that. It was just, it was absolutely horrendous, because then we were left not knowing whose loved one it was, or, you know, which ones were already dead. And then a few days later, we had to go back, and that's where we had individual meetings with Dr. Kirkup, and he told us, you know, your loved one was one of the 41, which was really distressing for him. So then we're then processing that my dad was not only one of the 41 that could have survived, but then we were handed all of the statements from police officers related to him, and we were suddenly left with this statement that told us that he was found alive behind the goal, which was something that we never knew before. We didn't even know that he went through a turnstile. We never knew how he got into that ground. So to then learn days later that David Crompton had said something like that without even knowing what the outcome was going to be, it really, really cheesed me off. So I was one of, I think there was 6 of us in total. And we personally called for David Crompton to be sacked, and, you know, on the grounds of, you know, professional misconduct. You can't send an email like that when you don't even know what the outcome is. And then the outcome of the HIP report didn't go in their favour, did it? And we were left with even more trauma than what we went in there with. And so he sued us and won, because he argued that we were trying to get him sacked from his job, and sort of like, I can't remember now, a lot's happened since then, but sort of trying to imply that we were bullying or harassing him in some way. And so as a result of that, we were sued for all of his legal fees, which was like, when we worked it out, we all needed £5,000 each. And at the time, I wasn't even working. I was a single parent on benefits, you know, and I didn't have a penny to rub together. So Diane Lynn from the Hillsborough Survivors Alliance actually did a crowdfunder, and very generously, yet again, the public helped us, and it was that money that was raised that paid his fees. But then there was also, during the recent prosecutions of David Duckenfield, his barrister, Ben Myers, tried to have me personally prosecuted for contempt of court. Didn't go anywhere.
How do you pick yourself up, Charlotte, after all of these knockbacks? Is it hard to just one after the other? Yeah. one of my sons, Les knows, and Peter, one of my son's best friends is Graham Hammond, and I've known Graham since he was a little boy. And,
Yeah.
all the way through, when I'm listening to your story, I was thinking of Graham, you know, as you're talking, the same sort of thing. I I'd never had the guts to sort of ask to Graham, because I wouldn't upset him for the world. But how do you pick yourself up day after day after every knockback?
So I think for me, my focus now is the survivors. And, you know, these are the people who told the truth right from the minute they left that ground. And if they hadn't have, and if other family members hadn't have fought the way that they did, I would never, ever have known what happened to my dad. He literally would have gone to the grave on a complete lie, and we would never have known what happened to him. So for that, I'll always be eternally grateful. So I think that I definitely feel like I connect to survivors more than I do family members, only in the sense that survivors seem to understand my mental trauma and my, you know, when I'm having a bad day with PTSD and I'm stuck in that loop where you can't think of anything else, they get it. Whereas I've never really had the guts to speak to family members like that. I don't feel like it's my place to, and everybody's situation is so unique, and we all kind of have that mutual respect for each other. So I just sort of focus on all the good that everybody else did, and you know, survivors just don't deserve the way that they are treated now, and I just can't stand it. I can't stand it that they're still, you know, blamed even now, or the, you know, what we were talking about earlier, the hate chants, and you just think, God, you know, these people did nothing but good. They did nothing but good on the day. They, without question, they knew how traumatic it was going to be to come and give evidence at the inquest. Not one of them hesitated. They showed up, they spoke their truth, and then they continued to support us thereafter. Never, you know, grumbled about their own mental health problems or concerns about what this was going to do to them. They knew that they had to speak up for the dead, and they did it, no questions asked. And, you know, and you just think, how many more times can we all just stand silent and not say anything? I'm not prepared to be one of those people that just ignores that survivors are forgotten, or that they're slandered in the way that they are, because actually the truth of Hillsborough wouldn't have been as strong as what it was without survivors. Family members can't take all the credit. It's probably a 50-50, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, you know, with the with this us, like, I mean, I was at Hillsborough, but I was in the stand above the Leppins Lane, so I don't, although I was there and I'm traumatized to this day, there's different reasons why different people are traumatized about Hillsborough. Part of my issue is that I felt I couldn't help anyone, because when I went down to the front of the stand, there was too many people there, so I couldn't pull anybody else up. And the second thing is, for me, is the year before, we the semi-final, as you probably know, had already also been we'd also had tickets for the stand the year before, even though we were all Cop season ticket holders. Me and all my mates went in the stand above, but some of the other lads who we went with on the Cop, they wanted to go on the terrace and behind the goal. And at that Notts Forest game where we beat them 5-0 at Anfield on the Wednesday after the first semi-final, we were saying to them, you know, must have been great in that behind the goal, because it looked superb. And he said, it was a nightmare there. Don't ever want to go there. Right. So the following year, I'm sort of going again. We've got tickets for Leppins Lane again. And the year before, I got them swapped at the Development Association, because I used to sell the lottery tickets. And then this time I went in again on the Thursday. And when I went in to swap my tickets, Kenny Addison said to me, sorry, Les, we've got no stand tickets left. And only the fact that I was with my girlfriend then, Michelle, who who got married to a year later, that she sort of said to me, "Oh, the players are leaving for Hillsborough today. Should we go round and see if we can see them getting on the coach?" So we goes round, stands in the car park, and as I was stood there waiting for the players to get on the coach, and I was particularly interested because Alan Hansen had been out injured. I wanted to see if he was going with them, and he was a boost. And while I was waiting, I noticed there was people coming out of the tickets office with tickets. So I sort of said to her, "Just wait there a minute. I'm going to go in and see if they've got any stand tickets left and if they'll swap the tickets." So I goes into the ticket office, and there's a guy behind the counter. I always remember, I could pick him out from my lineup now. That's how good my memory is back to then. And I said to him, "Any chance you could swap I've got 7 ground tickets. Could I swap them for 7 stand tickets?" I said, "You'll pay the difference, you know." I said, "Oh, I know that." I said, "If you've got any, I'd like to swap them." He said, "Yeah, we have." So give us your ground tickets. I've given the 7 ground tickets. He gave us the 7 stand tickets. I swapped the tickets, was made up, give him the difference of the money, went out, said, "We've got the stand tickets," made up. But to this day, that guilt lays with me now, because I don't know if anybody got them 7 tickets. I'll never ever know, but that sort of sticks with me, and that's where part of my guilt comes from. And as I say, I know Peter Carney very well. I know, Cav very well, Damien Kavanagh, and I've heard all their stories about what went on in the Leppings Lane end, and then I think it was on the 20th anniversary, Gary Flintoff took me back to do a little piece of Radio Merseyside,
right?
And he took me down that tunnel. The tunnel was empty, right? I was the only one walking down there, and it was so airy.
Yeah.
And now, and I think all these people who mock Hillsborough, they just have not got a clue.
No, they don't.
What it was like, and the people who were there suffer, and people like yourself suffer, and as I say, every time you thought you were getting somewhere, now the truth has come out now, as we were discussing with the independent report. But then I wanted somebody to pay for what like myself, all the other families had suffered.
Sure.
People who'd survived the Leppings Lane, and people like myself, I wanted somebody to pay for that. And yet, at every turn, it just seemed that somebody somewhere would sort of think, "Nah, nobody's going to get punished for this." I think there was only Sheffield Wednesday's sort of safety officer who sort of copped a bit of a... So how, once we move on, we go through the second lot of inquest. I remember breaking down in tears when I heard it was 12-0 to us, basically, with the verdicts of that brilliant jury. And then
I think it was 14-0, wasn't it? 14 questions.
14-0, sorry. And then
no, it's okay.
You actually move on, and you think, right, now we've got the unlawful killing verdict. Now, sure, somebody is going to pay. And some people who are sort of missed out when sort of fingers are pointed by us. You know what I mean? How they dragged their feet. And there were some people who didn't sort of even get charged, who were thought should have been charged, because they were forefront of the cover-up.
Definitely. I mean, I've got my own opinions, and I don't expect everybody to agree with them. But honestly, I don't feel it was right that David Duckenfield was put on trial solely for being responsible for the Hillsborough disaster. I think there were so many other people that should have been there with him, because at the end of the day, it was his first match as commander at that ground. And I feel like he should have had his senior or another senior with him, making sure that all the things that were in order should have been in order. Was it like that then in 1989? I don't know. And am I just being naive? Possibly. But I do feel that there should have been other people on trial with Duckenfield, and Superintendent Greenwood should have been one of them, that's for sure. And, you know, and then we need to look at, like, you know, Norman Batterson. For someone that didn't know a lot about what went on the day, he knew he had enough information to write a book. So, you know what I mean? Like, what? So why are we overlooking that? He's told you, as the Operation Resolve, as a police investigation into the Hillsborough disaster, he's told you he didn't know anything. He sat at the inquest and said that he was just the sandwich runner, and he just used to go and get sandwiches from Marks and Spencer's. He actually sat in the inquests of those that were dead and said that was his evidence. And then he releases a book, and it's just like, well, for somebody that doesn't know anything, you know a hell of a lot. Do you know what I mean? And I think they've missed a trick with things like that there. But even like you were saying then about the IPCC, and it's the IOPC now, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've changed the name again. So they're in the process now of releasing another report. And all they keep on saying to us is, we've got to go through a salmon process. So a salmon process is where we write to those who we think have done wrong or are going to be criticised in our final report. And that then gives them the opportunity to seek legal advice and respond. So this salmon process, the salmon process has started now. So they're focusing on police officers. So I assume that we're only focusing on South Yorkshire police officers. So they're now writing to South Yorkshire police officers to let them know that they're being criticised in their report. Well, if we're criticising them because they did wrong on the day of the Hillsborough disaster, why the hell did they not charge them 2, 3, 4 years ago? Why are we just criticising them in a report? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems like a bit of a lengthy process to me to be writing to. If they've said that once they receive this letter, they've got so many days to respond, and then we've got, and it's just like, so they've predicted that the report may not be released for another year. Well, how many police officers are you criticising then? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't sit right with me that we can write a report and that's all that it ever is, isn't it? Just give them another report, give them another report. Well, that's not worth anything anymore, I don't think.
No, as I say, it's one of them where, oh, you know, we've done this, we've done this report, we've done that we've done that, and it's like when they charge so many people. Well, we have, you know, processed so many of these police officers or people who are associated with Hillsborough. We feel is a fault. You know, we have put some of them for trial, but there could have been about 3 times as many that were charged at least. I mean, I asked you a question maybe, and I don't know whether you remember a while back, is that how many police officers were on duty at Hillsborough that particular day.
Yeah.
And the reason I asked you that question was because I sit here sometimes when I get me flashbacks at Hillsborough, and I think, you know, there was some good policemen there who did try to help, and there was some, when you've watched some of the documentaries about Hillsborough, who've actually come forward and, you know, told the truth about them being told to change, you know, the state, the books, etc., and told what's happened. But, you know, it was a very, very small percentage of the police who were on duty that particular day.
Yeah.
And as concerned, and I might be totally naive in this thought, but from my point of view, every one of those policemen who didn't come forward and tell the truth that they were told to change their statements in their pocketbooks, or stood back and didn't come forward and tell the truth, or they should have been charged with perverting the course of justice.
100%. I totally agree with you. I really do. I totally agree with you. And one of my biggest angers about that is, so the inquest began in 2014, and then we had all the pen portraits. Then we looked at some brief information about the ground, the history of the ground, and then we went into the individual inquests. Just before my dad's individual inquest, my legal team came to me and said, Charlotte, Operation Resolve have dropped these statements on us. We think that you might want to take a look at them. And I was just like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll take them home. And they were like, no, Charlotte, we think that we should look at them together. We've already seen them. We think that you should look at them with us. And I was just like, right, okay. So I did. And in these new statements that were taken in 2014, solely for the individual in question, my dad, 2 police officers said that they were handed over my dad's body in the gym. They put him in a body bag. I'm not going to go into detail, by the way, because it is quite graphic and it is quite distressing. But they put him in a body bag. And then when they went back to check him later, they found that, you know, there were signs that maybe he wasn't dead. They didn't tell anyone. They didn't do anything about it. They just popped him back in and off they went about their day. Now, they never disclosed that to anyone until Operation Resolve went to see them in 2014. So I was just like, right, okay, well, what the hell? So they knew that there was a possibility that my dad was alive at that point, and they've kept it to themselves. Bearing in mind, I'd just done public appeals to try and find a St. John ambulance person that may have helped my dad. And this public appeal had been everywhere, every newspaper, every news bulletin at 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. It was everywhere. So not only had they kept it for themselves, but they'd actively watched me search for people that may have answers about my dad and still didn't say anything. So I said to my legal team, well, I'm going to have to make you a list of questions because I can't get my head around that. They're effectively saying that my dad wasn't dead and I'm not having that. Why didn't they go and tell someone? Why didn't they get him medical help? Or why didn't they even just put him in the recovery position? So my legal team go back and they speak to their legal team and they say, we want to call these 2 men as witnesses. And I was met with, one of them can't give evidence because he's too old now. And the other one can't give evidence because they're too mentally unwell. And I was just like, hold on a minute. What about my mental health? I've just been told yet another bombshell of information about my dad that nobody has come forward and said in 24 years. So no, I want him to give evidence at my dad's inquest. He was one of the very last people to see him and touch him, and he is giving evidence. So basically, he then had to go through a medical assessment, and a psychiatrist on behalf of Operation Resolve or South Yorkshire Police, whoever it was that he was appointed by, concluded that no, he wasn't mentally well enough. But I had to sit through those inquests every day for 2 years. But he was too mentally unwell to come and give some vital evidence, you know, something so as important as that. And he was allowed to not give evidence. And from that point, then I just thought, you know what, we might get answers, but we're never going to get prosecutions out of this. And I just knew then.
Thanks for that, Charles. Absolute disgrace. That Pete wants to ask you a question.
Well, it was a while back, but I was just going to say, Charlotte, the successive governments and stuff, I was quite pleased in a way that Jack Straw we were going to get some results via Jack Straw. And then at the end of the day, I think it was Lord Justice, was it Stuart Smith?
Smith, yeah.
And again, they turned around and said there's no evidence, and the evidence is still coming to light, like you say about, you know, that person with your dad.
Yeah.
And all of us who were there can recount stories still to this day. I can see faces, people I don't know personally, but I can describe people I was standing next to.
Yeah.
Me wife at the Leppens Lane, and I go cold when I talk about it, but we went in early because we tried to get a good spec, and we walked down that tunnel. And I'd been there previously against Arsenal in a semi-final, and it was a horrible terrace. So we got in early, and I bought a programme, and I don't normally buy programmes, and I said to my wife, we better move from here. I said, because when all the lads come in late on, they're going to be sitting and stand on the bars so they can see. And I still go cold when people ask me, when they say, did you go? And we had the foresight to move, and we walked back out of that tunnel. And only through us asking a steward, we didn't know where we were going, and he told us to go up a staircase, etc., etc. But I really thought with Jack Straw, I thought you were going to get some real make headway in that, and it was so difficult when it came to nothing again. Kickbacks over the years, and I don't know. I just don't know how you and all. I mean, people say, "Oh, you survived Hillsborough," and I say, "Well, I wasn't physically injured, but as I say, I can still see faces now. I can still remember conversations that I had with people in the
Yeah.
ground, because there was a nurse by us, and she said, "I'm going down to help," and I
Oh,
can still see them. So in that score, yeah, I suppose you can class us as survivors, but because
yeah.
I was physically injured, and there's so many of us, there's so many people who after that fateful day, you know, that it changed their lives forever. I had a friend, well, it was a friend of a friend of a friend, if you want, but I knew him well, and he passed to Hillsborough, and it's just a horrible
Mm,
thing, you know. And like Les and Tom were saying, you know, we still go to matches regularly now, and some of the things we get aimed at us, and
mm.
I do think some of these idiots that come out with these chants and that, they don't even know what they're talking about, but they don't
No.
realise the benefit it
Mm,
causes
yeah.
to, you know, I went to City a couple of weeks ago, and I was pretty close to the you know, to the police cordon, the segregation, and some of the things that have, you know, shouted at you, and it's horrible to this day, and you just wonder, you know, how people think that they call it banter. It's not
Yeah.
banter at all. People's lives,
Yeah.
and did you have any siblings, Charlotte? Did you have a brother or sister to what
No,
was
I
your
didn't. No. So I was an only child, and I mean, I never ever knew really. But when my mum and dad were together, like late 70s, and then she got pregnant with me, and my dad's mum. She was very Catholic. God bless her. She died in the March, just as we were going into the COVID pandemic. But yeah, so she was very Catholic, and when my dad said that my mum was pregnant, she made them get married, and my mum was I think she was only about probably wasn't even 3 months pregnant, and my nan was just like, it's not non-negotiable, you're marrying her. Anyway, they were divorced by 1985, which also wasn't a thing then, and my nan wasn't best pleased about that either, being the Catholic lady that she was. But I never ever, you know, I never knew that because it was just, I just always remembered my dad being there. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it just wasn't something that I ever needed to know. But it's just, you know, it's little things like that. Like going back to what you were saying there about, you know, that you don't, because you didn't have physical injuries, like, you know, you don't feel like you're a survivor, but you are a survivor, Pete, because every day you survive and battle with that mental trauma. And I know firsthand how, I wasn't there at Hillsborough, but I am sort of like, I am a victim of Hillsborough, and I am a victim of South Yorkshire police failings, and the mental torture and health problems that it's left me with, because those things were never answered and solved, is totally different to what you guys go through. And that, I think that's what I try and focus on a lot more, is that we do know a lot more about how things impact on mental health now. And I don't think that there is enough help out there. I don't think there's enough credit given for mental trauma either. You know, it can just be one tiny thing that can trigger any one of us. What's something that triggers me might be completely different that triggers you, and it's completely different again that triggers Les, you know. But you are a survivor because, you know, you've carried on and you've battled through that mental trauma side of it, and it's that makes me focus on like these hate chants and speak out about them, because I just think it's probably not, when these fans are chanting, you know, always the victims and the sun was right, you murderers, I don't think it's that deep for them. They don't know that you're sitting there and you're a Hillsborough survivor. They don't know that I'm at that match with my little boy. They're not even thinking about that. They're just saying it to be nothing but hateful. And that's my point. It's not that deep for them. It is just sheer horrid hatefulness to get a reaction, and they say those things to hurt, and they know that it does hurt us. They're not saying it because they believe it's true. They're saying it to be downright nasty.
Yeah.
And you know, and then I can't remember what was it. I think it was. I can't remember now. There's been a few times when it's been chanted anyway, and I've written, emailed, you know, various clubs, and I've got a paper trail and I can back it all up. So when I noticed that it was getting worse, I mean, it got significantly worse after Duckenfield was found not guilty. You can see like a trend, you know, in the chants were really bad after that. So I started emailing clubs, and I'd say to them, you know, I'm the daughter of Jimmy Hennessy, and you know, your fans were chanting this, and this is the impact that it has on me and now my child, because we're at the game and he's being subjected to that too, but he wasn't even born then. And at
You've got to
first,
explain,
yeah.
You've got
So
to
then,
try and
you
explain
know,
to them.
like at first you could get away with it, but now he's nearly 12, and like the kid, you guys will know exactly what I mean when I say the child lives and breathes football. He loves it. There's nothing, he plays in goal. There's nothing else that he wants to do. You know, it doesn't matter who's playing. He's interested in that game, and you know, all that. He's got a fantasy football league, and he does all the stickers, and he has a little poster on the wall and puts all the scores on, and he just loves it. So, but there's times when, you know, like just for example, playing Man City, he's an 11-year-old, nearly 12-year-old little boy. Haaland, Jack Grealish, to him, they're just like heroes, and he would love nothing more than to go to Anfield to watch someone like Liverpool v Man City. I won't take him. There's no way I am putting myself in that position and having the chance on the outside, the chance on the inside, and then that being triggering for me and him, like it, because it's quite hostile, isn't it? We took him to the Champions League match last season against Napoli. Never experienced anything like it in my life. What a horrible, horrible set of fans they are. And that was at Anfield, and I was really taken aback by it. And I just thought, no, I can't. So if that's how I feel, and I wasn't at Hillsborough, how can survivors? How must they be feeling when you know it's being chanted at them? Doesn't it?
Makes you so angry. You just feel like going up to them and just saying, "Look, why you doing these things?"
Yeah.
You know. And the other thing as well that annoys me, that you'll be watching the football on the telly, and the commentators will have to say, "Oh, we apologise for any bad language." Someone might in the crowd effing Jeff, and it comes across.
Yeah.
But then a minute later, they're all singing "Always the Victims" and stuff like that. You should, you know, Carragher has got an ideal opportunity when he's co-commentating with the other fella, whose name I won't mention because he winds me up, just to say, this has got to stop it. And you know, they're on national, international telly. Start making a thing of it. But they'll try and apologise for someone losing his rag at the match and effing and jeffing.
Yeah.
But, you know, the only thing, the ones I can take my hat off to who come to Anfield, and I've said it for a few years now, the best fans who come to Anfield, and never heard them singing anything like that, and they support the team at Crystal Palace. And I might, someone might put me right on that, but I haven't heard Crystal Palace ever doing anything like that. And Arsenal were brilliant on Sunday.
Yeah, their minute silence on Saturday was
as well. They'd never once.
Yeah, it was amazing. Oh no, Sunday it was, wasn't it? Yes, yeah. We watched that at home, and honestly, I was really. It's the first time in a very long time that a memorial service has actually has moved me, because you know, last year there was a minute silence, wasn't there? And we played Man City that year. And as soon as you see it, you know, when all the matches come out, I always look, who have we got around about the 15th? And it's just that dread. And I just think, you know, clubs need to start being accountable for that. If nobody's been held more accountable for their fans than our club, so why does that rule not apply to all of the others? And I tell you what else I'm sick of as well. This whole notion that fans say, Always the Victims is about Heysel. What an absolute nonsense that is. How can a song, Always the Victims, be about Heysel when Liverpool fans never claim to be and have never excused themselves to be the victims of Heysel? It makes no sense whatsoever. Do you know what I mean? Like, where's who come up with that one? We've never said that we were the victims of Heysel. We've been tarred with the actions of those people for a long time. What, 38 years this year? Nobody's more ashamed and appalled than we are. So that drives me mad. Oh, it's about Heysel. Well, how? You tell me then, how is that chant about Heysel? Because Liverpool fans were never the victims. So why are you chanting at us? Always the victims about Heysel? What doesn't even make sense?
It's reflective of, it's reflective of society, though, isn't it, at the moment? I think it's more a social media thing. It got worse over the last few years, I would definitely say. But I think it's up to the FA and or the Premier League to be the punishers of it. You deduct points, or that you fine clubs and make them individually responsible, and that will end. And I agree with what Peter said about Crystal Palace and Arsenal. I can't remember too many other teams, to be brutally honest. On my own Hillsborough thing, I was sat in the North Stand right down by the Nottingham Forest end, by where the ambulance was, down the bottom end.
Yeah.
But like Les, I could never go back to Sheffield. Never been back to Sheffield. Never, ever come back to Sheffield, and find it difficult even to travel that way. But it's just, I think until the clubs are punished, I think that will be an ongoing thing. But I do believe there is a movement now, though. I do believe that clubs now are getting it now and seeing, and they're apologising right away. So I think it's only a matter of time before I think that will be ended.
Yeah.
The other question I was going to ask you, Charlotte, is where is the Hillsborough law up to now?
So the Hillsborough law has been endorsed by Keir Starmer, whatever anybody's views may be on him. He has said that if he becomes Prime Minister and the Labour Party win in the next general election, one of the first things that he will do is pass, the Hillsborough law. But where we're at is Maria Eagle has taken, because the formal name for it is the Public Accountability Bill, but we just, it's AKA the Hillsborough law. And Maria Eagle has taken it into the House of Commons, and she's been shut down 12 times. They've refused to hear it. So I think that she actually does she's booked in to take it to Parliament again. I know that Ian Byrne has also tried, and he's met with the same response. Like, they just object to it straight away. She doesn't even get a chance to speak about it or explain what exactly it is. Do you know what I mean? So
who's shutting them down, Cheryl? Who's actually shutting it down?
So Maria Eagle stands up in the House of Commons, obviously you have to book your slot. So she books the slot, she arrives, she attempts to, she asks for permission to speak about the Public Accountability Bill, and then the two little people that sit on the bench next to the, what's he called, the spokesperson, they instantly stand up, they say object, he objects, and she's sent on her way, and that's it. That's literally it. She doesn't get a chance to say anything.
You just get the impression that even if they try to put the points over and have a discussion, they just filibuster it anyway.
Yeah.
They would do. Yeah. That's what I mean. It just amazes me, and I just hope this Hillsborough law does come through, because we're in this day and age, not just about Hillsborough but anything else, and the way politicians and high-ranking officials can just lie their way out of.
See, this is the thing. Yeah, and this is the thing that I can't understand. Like, so the public accountability doesn't just focus on, in case there's another Hillsborough disaster. This is bringing people who work within public authority, public sectors, doctors, nurses. We see it all the time that there's been misconduct, whether it's a nurse that's looking after young children or, or carers that are working with the elderly. This would cover them as well, to give them a duty of candour, that should something happen whilst they're within their professional role, they have a duty of candour to tell the truth. But not only that, it will ensure that, families, for whatever reason, if you lose a loved one, and that is, within a capacity that requires an inquest or an inquiry, it will make sure that those families get funding, sort of like on an equal par. Because at the inquests, Duckenfield and South Yorkshire Police, and then the police officers, I can't remember exactly now. I know there was Denton Foster, Metcalfe, there was a few others. They all had, I think even Norman Betterson had his own legal team. They all sort of like broke off and fell out, and the one didn't want to be associated with the other, so they all had their own legal teams. And it cost millions. And if Theresa May hadn't ensured that we, family members, were given funding, I don't know what we would have done. I don't know. I don't know what we would have done. I don't think there would have been inquests. So then how many other people are in the same position where they've lost a loved one, they can't get legal aid? It's a bit like Nicole and Kai. They lost their little boy Zane, and it was down to poisoning that had come from like a landfill it was really quite far underground by their home. And the chemicals and toxins from that has come through and leaked into their home, and they've inhaled it. Zane's died. Nicole, his mum, nearly died, and his dad is now completely paralysed. But they won't give that little boy a proper inquiry. And you just think, God, well, why not? Because it doesn't suit their agenda. And that's primarily the focus of the Public Accountability Bill.
Thanks for that, Charles. We're coming up to our hour now, so I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been very insightful, very emotional, and it must have been difficult for you to, keep relaying those stories. So we thank you from the bottom of our heart for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the end of the latest edition of the LFC Red Poets podcast. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, even though it might be a difficult listen for people. Just remember, there are people out there for you if you need to speak to anybody.